This second part was really not even meant to exist. But I'm realizing that I'm starting to get people sending me emails, and then in consultation they're telling me about homestead exemption. I'm realizing, oh shoot, people really don't get it. People are mixing and matching. People are mixing and matching. Don't do that. Don't subrogate yourself. Don't submit yourself to them. Homestead exemptions, if it is not religious, does not remove you from tax roll. If it is not religious, even though it says homestead exemption, so long as it's not religious, it is still on the tax roll. So now you're voluntarily putting the deed in the name of the express trust, and now you putting the express trust on a tax roll. Oh my goodness, come on now. Why would you do that? Whereas the other types of exemptions, the general exemptions, the veteran exemption, the disabled exemptions, still has the property on the tax rolls. So even if you do use your express trust and you claim a general exemption, it is still on the tax roll. And yearly you will still have to do a certification affidavit to the assessor. That's the gray area people don't know about. It's one of those situations people do now. They're happy, they get the hype train, cool. But then down the line, they start getting more lettered. And of course, if you have a warrior mindset, that wouldn't be a big deal. You just learn and you just keep it moving, which is good. You should not sulk over situations if you're learning stuff. But I'm just telling you right off the bat from the start, save yourself that headache and just do it right from the start. If you're going to do it, just do it right. It's like lifting weight, exercising. If you're going to start doing it right. Don't rush it. You would injure yourself. You would hinder your muscles' ability to heal. You want to recover well, all that stuff. Just do it right from the start. Watching the following videos of the thumbnails and posts and reading them before actually watching this video would give you a better clarity of everything spoken of in this video, because all these video and text posts that were created were preceding factors deliberately created to lead and build up to this point. Hello beautiful people, welcome back. So in the first part of this video, I partly mentioned that there are many different types of homestead exemption. The one that we focused on that first video was a religious one. If there are many different types of homestead exemption, and religious being one of them, the question is, how come that's the main one that I focused on? The main one that I focused on was religion because that has the highest advantage. Remember, as mentioned in that video, no different than the comparison with 501c3 and 508 entities, whereby 501c3 has to basically file a report. They call it compliance report to show that the owners are still the same, you're still making this much, so that you can retain that tax exempt status. Whereas 508s don't even require said compliance status, because by default it is exempt from taxation in any way. No different than 508 compared to LLCs, whereby LLCs have to basically do an annual report to show that the owners are still the same, blah, blah, blah. The Secretary of State, whereby 508, it's unincorporated. You don't have to do it. Well, the same applies with property taxes when it comes to homes. And we showed it in that video. First part, explaining that religious entities that hold properties and consequently gets a homestead exemption under the capacity of being a religious entity does not have to do that filing requirement. And here is a portion of that first part of the video. But here's the exception. Even after you get the exemption as a religious entity, you don't have to do the certification. No different than if you have your own unincorporated trust that you're doing business certification to keep the homestead. So it mentioned all the requirements of certification to keep the homestead status if you're exempt. Then here's an exception to that. It says, however, title holders or owners of a beneficial interest in any property exempted under any of the following provisions are not required to submit an annual filing under this section. However, title holders or owners of the beneficial interest in any property exempted under any of the following provision, meaning whatever we're about to list, are not required to submit an annual filing under this section. And what are those entities that are not required to constantly say, hey, I still qualify, so I'm certifying each year. You're my God. Keep giving me permission. What entity does not have to do that? If you're using a property as a burial ground, and section 1540, which you just read when it comes to exemption for religious entities. There it is. That's the specific portion that basically lets you know religious entities don't have to yearly say, hey, the one who owns this property is still the same, and that the status of the entity is still this. You don't have to do any of that. Why did I prioritize that type of home exemption that they call homestead exemption? Why did I prioritize it over other type of exemptions when it comes to property? Because remember in that video I also mentioned there are different types of homestead. The reason why I prioritize it is because if you are to start something ahead of time, you should go for the best one. And it behooves me if I begin to introduce these things and I don't introduce you to the best ones, and I just give you the half-assed version. Now here's the other half-assed version. Once we go over the half-assed versions, I will now show you why the first one we showed, which is religious homestead exemption, why it's actually superior. So what is homestead exemption? Homestead exemption, and this same principle exists in every state. Homestead exemption means an exemption under section 15165, which is specifically veterans with disability, meaning there's a specific section for veterans with disability, whereby veterans with disability can have homestead exemption. Homestead exemption means an exemption under section 15167, returning veteran. Returning veterans have a specific homestead exemption for them. Homestead exemption means an exemption under section 15168, person with disabilities. People with disabilities have their own homestead exemption. Homestead exemption means an exemption under section 1570, senior citizens. 15172, low income senior citizens. So old people and old people who make low amount of monies, they have their own homestead exemption to assist them financially, to assist veterans financially, to assist people with disability financially. Homestead exemption means exemption under section 15-175, general homestead exemption, 15-176, alternative general homestead exemption, or 15-177, long-time occupants. For those who do land development, we usually get the homestead exemption under 15-177 and 15-176. So you now see that the other types of homestead exemption that exist are for people based on some type of financial need. The reason why we land developers get homestead exemption on the things we develop that we now use as Section 8 is because those Section 8 tenants have financial challenges. That's the reason why these two exist. But the one, the everyday man who works a 9-to-5, manages his own business, but just intends to reduce their tax liability one way or the other, the one they usually do, if they are not veterans with disability, if they're not returning veterans, if they're not disabled, if they're not veterans who are disabled, if they're not senior citizens, or if they're not senior citizens with low amounts. What the everyday man does and gets is actually called general homestead. So the general homestead is what the everyday man usually go after. And the form for that in Illinois is P-Tax 203. It might be called something else in your state. This general homestead exemption is one that anyone can qualify for. Now, what is the main difference between all these type of homestead exemption compared to the religious one? Remember, this is under the revenue code, the same one we read, 305//200, property tax. This definition is under it. And under homestead exemption, if you notice, it mentions nothing about religious exemption. Meaning religious homestead exemption is actually a different status of exemption compared to all these other type of exemption. It defines what, quote, homestead exemption is, and it gives you the list of what it considers as homestead exemption. Religious exemption, when it comes to homes, are different from regular homestead exemptions. That is very important for you to know, because religious exemptions are based in substance. The regular homestead exemptions that people do are based on privilege, meaning the county is saying, okay, we know inflation goes up, people go broke, things get hard in the economy, so we'll help you. We'll help you if you're a veteran and you're suffering with money, if you're older, if you have disability and you don't have the opportunity in society to make money or compete to make money, we'll help you. And if you're just the everyday citizen, you know, still hustling middle class, okay, we'll help you. It's based on financial status. But the religious exemption that was shown in the first part of this is based solely, strictly on a spiritual principle that's affirmed by the Constitution. On a federal level, it's the First Amendment. At Illinois, the equivalence of it is in the preamble, where everyone has the right to political and religious liberties, and it is in the third section of Bill of Rights, where it says the free exercise of enjoyment of religion, profession, and worship without discrimination shall forever be guaranteed. The fact that your religious profession and worship cannot be discriminated means whatever anyone else is benefiting from, under any other circumstances of privilege, it is automatically a right to you. No different than the things corporations do. Everyday man can do it too. So wherever you see any type of exemption, anywhere, know that the religious entities or any constitutional secured rights, in this case religious rights, can actually benefit from it also, but in a greater increment. The greater increment in this case is that religious entities don't have to do annual reports, as was shown in that video. The reason religious entities don't have to do an annual certification or affidavit that, hey, this is what the status of the property is, hey, I still own this property, so keep giving me the property tax exemption. The reason religious entities don't have to do that is because it is a right. Homestead exemptions for everyone else, based on your financial situation in society, is a privilege. Hence, you have to report it yearly, that your financial stability is still a certain way and that you still own it. You have to basically keep telling them about yourself yearly. Otherwise, this is what would happen. 35 ILCS 204/1510. The same principle and language exists in your state. Exempt property, procedures for certification. Those types of regular privileged homestead exemptions, did you know they have to do yearly certifications? They have to do yearly certifications. Otherwise, this is what happens. All property granted an exemption by the department pursuant to the requirements of section 15-5 and described in the sections following section 1530 and preceding section 16-5, meaning all exemptions mentioned from section 15-30 to 16-5, which are all those different types of exemptions that we mentioned. To the extent they're limited, meaning it's a limited type of exemption, they're telling you these things. It's right in black and white. Is exempt from taxation. Cool. In order to maintain the exempt status, the title holder or the owner of the beneficial interest of any property that is exempt, in order for them to maintain the status, they must, it's not some option, it is a mandatory thing. They must, in order to maintain the tax status of homestead. So this is the part that anyone telling you about homestead exemptions, they really don't tell you about. They don't tell you this portion. They don't tell you this portion that there's a yearly certificate that you have to file. Otherwise, they will strip you of that status. That's the reason why I'm not even speaking about this regular type of homestead exemption, because I know there's contingencies to it. Contingency is if you don't do this, this happens. If that, but this, but probably somehow, you know, those are all contingencies. The first one we showed in that first video, the first part to this second part, does not have contingency. It's straight, cutthroat, and dry. The last portion of the part that benefit religious exemptions, whereby you don't need to do yearly certification, is also under this 1510. And that's the part that we read in that first part of the video that mentioned section 1540, which we just shown earlier. Now, the part we didn't read in that video fully It's the part that mentions other types of exemption, which were mentioned from 1530 to 16-5. Even though 15-40 is in between it, they nonetheless clarify here that there's an exception, and that exception to filing the yearly certification is 15-40, which is religious exemption. Everything else between 15-30 and 16-5, in order for them to maintain the exempt status, they must file with the Chief County Assessment Office, meaning the assessor, on or before January 31st of each year, an affidavit stating whether there has been any change in the ownership or use of the property, the status of the owner residence, that is if it's for general homestead, the satisfaction by relevant hospital entities of the condition for an exemption under 1586, or the veteran with disability who qualifies under 15165 owned and used the property as of January 1st of that year. The nature of any change shall be stated in the affidavit. Failure to file an affidavit shall, in the discretion, meaning when they use this word discretion, it means whatever they're given to you is a privilege and they can take it away as they want. That's what the word discretion means. Failure to file an affidavit shall, in the discretion of the assessment officer, constitute cause to terminate the exemption of that property, notwithstanding any other provision of this code. Meaning, if you're not a religious entity and you're taking any other type of normal exemption, if you don't file that yearly certification affidavit to basically say, hey, I'm still the owner, hey, I still make this amount, blah, 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 so that you can give me some exemption up to $4,000, they're gonna strip you of that exemption because it is a privilege. Privilege on your end, a discretion on theirs. But a religion is not a privilege. It is a substantive right. Therefore, they give you an exception here where it says, however, title holders or owners of the beneficial interest in any property exempted under any of the following provisions are not required to submit an annual filing under this section. 1540. 1540 deals with religious entities, which we went over in the first part of this video. So every other type of exemptions have to do a yearly certification to say, hey, I still qualify. Hey, keep giving me permission. You see the reason why I did that first part and showed you where the juice is right off the bat? So I'm showing this second part to let you know that if you've yet to set up your 508 and all those things, there's still a way out for you. But just know that the caveat is yearly, you have to sign an affidavit for them. And in Illinois, in that affidavit, they require you to put your ID there and to show how much you make, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how it is for the States, but that's how it is here. Whereas for the religious entity, you don't need all that crap. So I'm just letting you know what the full scope is. I hear some people tell me that, hey, they found out a process of how to do property tax exemption. I'm like, cool, awesome. Did you do it with a 508? They say, no, I did it with my express trust. See, that express trust, you're supposed to use it as a holding company for other entities. You're supposed to layer it privately. Its name, at best, should not be in the public. And when you do it with an express trust publicly, they classify it under general homestead exemption, not a religious homestead exemption. They classify any type of trust exemption as general, and that general homestead exemption falls under scrutiny of yearly certification. So now you're slowly putting your own express trust under the submission of other people's jurisdiction where you're not supposed to. It's supposed to be as private as can be. Use things properly and layer things properly is what I say. Most people who do that, a year to come, it might be stripped away from them because they don't realize this. At least you can say someone is not telling you. It's good to be excited to find new things out, but whoever is telling you about one thing or the other, make sure that they are giving you the full scope of how it works. That's all I'm saying. It works. Just make sure you get all the full scope and caveats involved. Now, if there's ever one type of caveat when it comes to the religious home exemption, I would say it's the beginning portion of it. Properties used for religious purposes and their exemptions does not require certification yearly. because the beginning point of it is actually a little bit of work. And when I say the beginning point of it is a little bit of work, is this. I don't know if you caught it within the first part of the video, but I mentioned that property tax number exists also. Just like you have to get an E number for sales and use, you have to get a number for property also. But the same process of applying for the religious purpose exemption is the same process that issues it. The same process of applying for the religious purpose exemption is the same process that issues it. So as you apply for the property owned by the church or religious entity to be removed from the tax roll of the county, that same process is what causes them to issue the property tax E number. That religious entity would be removed from the property tax rolls. And you probably hear a lot of people speak about take your properties off the tax roll because deeds are illegal, they're not supposed to do it, blah, blah, blah. But they're not telling you the way that you do that is to get an E number. The only way you can get an E number when it comes to property tax is to use a religious entity. When it comes to the regular types of other homesteads that we've shown earlier, they don't go through that extra step of getting E number. Although when I say extra steps for religious entities, that is also just implemented as a regular schedule into the process of taking off the tax roll. But the general types of homesteads and all the other ones for veterans, disabled people, long-term care, hospitals, veterans, all those are not taking it off the tax roll. Let's make that very clear. Henceforth, E numbers are not issued. They're just giving them a privilege based on the amount they have to yearly now do the legwork down the line. Whereas religious entities, it actually removes it from the tax rolls of the county completely. That's why you don't have to constantly go back to them yearly to do a certification, because you're not on that list of tax rolls of taxable properties anymore, in case it is not clear. And that is why in the beginning you have to do things like show the image of the property. You have to show no different than how you did for sales tax that was shown in that webinar. Very similar. And there's a specific form that you fill out for that for religious purposes, which is different from the other forms, which is P-Tax 203 for Illinois and other types of regular exemptions. So that's the only caveat that I'll give. The forms are different because it's different status and completely different affairs. It's a right that removes it from the tax roll completely. Whereas the other types of exemptions, the general exemptions, the veteran exemption, the disabled exemptions, still has the property on the tax rolls. So even if you do use your express trust and you claim a general exemption, it is still on the tax roll. And yearly you will still have to do a certification affidavit to the assessor. That's the gray area people don't know about. It's one of those situations people do now, they're happy, they get the hype train, cool. But then down the line, they start getting more letter. And of course, if you have a warrior mindset, that wouldn't be a big deal. You just learn and you just keep it moving, which is good. You should not sulk over situations if you're learning stuff. But I'm just telling you right off the bat from the start, save yourself that headache and just do it right from the start. If you're going to do it, just do it right. It's like lifting weight, exercising. If you're going to start doing it right. Don't rush it. You would injure yourself. You would hinder your muscles' ability to heal. You wouldn't recover well, all that stuff. Just do it right from the start. It's like starting any type of business. Do it right from the start. That way, when you begin to make money, you're not being dinged left and right. You're not getting some random letter that makes your heart sink. All that stuff. No different than any type of relationship. You get into any relationship, just do it right from the start. It's like having a child. Groom them from the start at a young age. Look at these other life affairs the same way. So when I give it to you from the start, I give you the right thing and the proper layer, because in the forefront, the express trust should not be on the forefront. The name of your express trust should never, ever be on the forefront. If you think about it with a vehicle, if you're doing a vehicle and you put in a 508 trust and you make an express trust the first lien holder, That means the 508 is in the name of the registration of the vehicle. But the one who really truly owns it is the first lien holder, which is express trust. Guess what? That's the same thing you'll be doing with your house. The express trust will be having a lien on that property. The one on the forefront of it will be the religious entities who will use their religious substantive constitutional right to remove that property from the tax rolls. Those founding fathers, those Puritans, you know there's a reason why they held onto Christianity religion so much, right? The reason why, even though their children in today's world wear that cross on their neck, to them that's just some fanciful stuff to say I'm a Christian and I go to church. All right, no one cares. The truth of why those founding fathers and all those other Puritans, they were hell-bent on Christianity is because they knew these powers. That's how they prevented the tax rolls. These are the things no one will tell you. And by the way, when I'm saying these things, this is not undermining or downplaying anything else you've heard anywhere else. But know that there are degrees to things, and there are ways that you can do it by saving yourself a headache. And that's what I'm here to clarify. That's why these are the subtle substance of things. See, the reality is anyone can get the same information. Two people can get the same information. The degree to which they know how to use that information is the only difference. The athlete that runs 5 seconds faster to break the world record from the one constantly tagging behind him the year after another year who's always the second, and the one is Usain Bolt. The reason why he's always first and all those other athletes are always behind him every year is because he does subtle substance of things. That's the difference. They do the same thing. They're both sprinters. They all do the same strength training. They all go through the same diet. They all know the same practical crap, but there's subtle details that some people do that makes them different than others. That's what I'm here to focus on. I'm not here to tell you whatever else you're learning somewhere else is bad or whatever you've heard somewhere else is bad. I'm not saying that, because they are right and they are valid. But I'm telling you, focus on the subtle substance and fine-tune the details. Be a master at it. Be a master at it by knowing the details to save yourself the headache and to perpetually keep it shut tight. If you're going to be putting all these effort into all these time, studying all these things, doing all these boring paperwork, you might as well make it worth it, is what I'm saying. So do it right from the start. Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. You want to take that property off tax roll, religious entities. You want to just temporarily be exempt from it based on your financial position that you claim, and then give them your ID. That's what those people who claim general exemptions don't tell you. They don't tell you have to give them an ID and all that stuff. They don't tell you that part, but you do. Just do it right is what I say. Don't put yourself under unnecessary scrutiny and save yourself the time yearly from doing this. Who knows what might come down a year or two from now. Maybe your life will be better and you'll be somewhere else just chilling. You've forgotten all that crap. And guess what? Someone writes you a letter to say, hey, you don't qualify for it. At our discretion, we'll remove it. And guess what? In fact, besides the fact that it's at their discretion, here's another thing people don't know. When they don't do property tax exemptions correctly. I'm not doing this to instill fear in you. I'm doing this to show you the importance of doing it right. And when you do it right, do it in a way that shuts all the door according to the Constitution. Because general exemptions, veteran exemptions, disabled exemption, senior citizens exemptions, all those other types of exemptions are actually not constitutional. They're privileges. They're governed by administrative codes. Did you know that? The only type of home exemptions that is constitutional is religious one, because that's the only right affirmed in the Constitution. See, the state constitution uses the term homestead exemption, but it becomes very vague. It uses it in a very vague manner. At Illinois, it sticks it at the miscellaneous section, and it leaves it very vague in general. It says the General Assembly shall pass liberal homestead and exemption laws. Do you know what the term liberal means? Liberal is an adjective, and it's a qualifying term. Willing to understand and respect other people's behavior, opinion, meaning privilege, meaning it's just your opinion. It's not a fact. It's just what you feel. But we'll understand and respect it. It's a courtesy, aka that term we read earlier, discretion. I hope you're seeing what's going on. The General Assembly shall pass liberal homestead exemption. That's the reason why I went over the first part of the video with the religious part. Because the religious part, if it's an exemption, it can stand by itself as exemption, but it also takes the benefit of homestead because you're using it as a home. But people who use homestead are using it liberally, meaning at the discretion of the ones issuing it, at the discretions of the one they have to yearly go to, which is the assessor. Liberally, meaning they're just in the understanding of your lifestyle, your opinion, etc. Especially when they are different from your own. Believing people should be able to choose how they behave. If you're of a lower middle class, you get the general homestead exemption because of your financial amount. If you're a veteran, well, you fought for us. So, we'll be liberal about it and we'll respect and understand that about you. If you're disabled, we'll respect that and understand about you. If you're senior, we'll respect that about you. That exemption, they didn't tell you the specificity of it. If you have eyes and you know about rights, truly, beyond just uttering those words, rights, you know that there are religious rights to free exercise and enjoyment of religion. And part of that free exercise of religion is if the religious entity owns their property, you don't qualify for property tax. It's called an E number for property tax. No different than sales and use tax that was shown in the past. That's the key. When it comes to property tax and you use a religious entity, you are exempt from it. Otherwise, it is just a liberal homestead. It is just someone just, at our discretion, we'll just respect that you're of this member of society and class of people, But because of that, we're not going to remove you off the tax roll. So just come to us yearly to remind us that we should respect you because it's at our discretion, as we've read. You're not exempt, so you're not off the tax roll, which a lot of people want, which is what a lot of people should want, which you hear a lot of people speak about. If you use a personal name or you use express trust. But why would you use express trust under homestead? Why would you put that express trust under the scrutiny of going to them yearly for certification? Why? You just subrogated yourself to go beg for something. Instead, use the proper religious entity and be exempt. Because the part of the Constitution that affirms and carries this exemption when it comes to property is your religious right. And part of that and exemption laws is not just property, it's sales and use also. Do you see how short and brief this section is and how they, again, place it towards the end? I always say everything they place briefly towards the end of anything when it comes to exceptions, exemptions, or others. That's always what benefits you. And there's always a puzzle piece to it somewhere else. In this case, the exemption based on your free exercise and enjoyment of your religious profession and worship. It is a right. That which is liberal is not a right. It is a privilege because someone just have to respect and understand it. It's different from theirs. We just respect it and understand it. So hopefully we don't forget. So just come to us every year and certify it. Now going back to people who might jump the gun and want to classify one thing as the wrong way without realizing with good intent, they have something for you. It's called Erroneous Homestead Exemptions. For purposes of this section, quote, erroneous homestead exemption means a homestead exemption that was granted for real property in a taxable year, meaning the presumption is you're already taxable. The presumption of religious entities is you're not taxable. That's the reason why they're removing it off the tax rolls. Any other type of liberal or discretionary exemptions, such as disability, such as senior, such as veteran, or such as the general homestead, which people now try to mix and match that with express trust. All right. Erroneous homestead exemptions mean a homestead exemption that was granted for real property in a taxable year. General homestead exemption and all those other types are presumed to be taxable, meaning if your property is presumed to be taxable and you file erroneously, this is what's for you. Erroneous homestead exemption means a homestead exemption that was granted for real property in a taxable year. Someone granted you exemption, even though you were presumed taxable. Religious entities don't have to go through the scrutinies because religious entities are not presumed taxable. Erroneous homestead exemption means a homestead exemption that was granted for real property in a taxable year. Meaning the presumption is you're not a religious entity. You're just going under the other types of exemptions. Erroneous homestead exemption means a homestead exemption that was granted for real property in a taxable year. If the property was not eligible for that exemption in that taxable year. If the taxpayer receives, remember, religious entities are not taxpayers. So the presumption here is if you're using the other type of exemptions, the general homestead, the senior citizen, veteran. If the taxpayer receives an erroneous homestead exemption under a single section of this, just one section of this code for the same property in multiple years, that exemption is considered a single erroneous homestead exemption for purpose of this section. Now, however, the taxpayer received erroneous homestead exemption under multiple sections of this code for the same property, or if the taxpayer receives erroneous homestead exemption under the same section of this code for multiple properties, then each of those exemptions is considered a separate erroneous homestead exemption for purposes of this section. In counties with 3 million or more inhabitants, when the chief county assessment officer determines that one or more erroneous homestead exemption was applied to the property, the erroneous exemption principal amount, together with all applicable interest and penalties as provided in subsections F and J, shall constitute a lien in the name of the people of Cook County on the property receiving erroneous homestead exemption. Meaning, if they figure out that you filed for a homestead exemption erroneously, one way or the other, that equivalent amount will be placed on that property in the form of lien. Now you see when I mentioned the express trust should be the lien holder, rather than you making the express trust the face receiving the exemption. A religious entity removes it from the tax roll, and then you secure that property so that no one else will come later by you putting your lien on that property. That is how you use the express trust when it comes to homestead exemption or any type of exemption. It should always be the holding company. That's why that term first lien holder has that word hold in it. That term holding company is not just a fancy term. It goes along with the term first lien holder. Holding company, first lien holder. That's the purpose. When it comes to money matter, regardless of qualifying tax status, regardless of doing banking, all that, the purpose of the express trust is to always be the holding company, aka to always be the first lien holder. The only way the county assessor can do this if they realize you're using the wrong entity for the wrong type of exemption, which most people doing the homestead exemption don't even know there are different types of it, and they don't even know that one keeps you in the same status of being a taxpayer, but the other removes it completely. They don't know that. Therefore, now they're mixing and matching what they call public and private, which they will tell you you don't mix public and private. Look, I'm just pointing all these things out to you as a caveat so that you cannot say someone is not telling you these things. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell all these people out here. If you're watching this on Patreon, tell people so people know about it. People you trust are not gung-ho. Tell them, explain it to them, show this to them. And figuring out information, you don't want to fuck your life up. Excuse my language, but let's just be honest with each other here. If you're going to do it right. If you mix and match and properly different types of exemptions, they will see that as an opportunity to pierce your trust. And then they will put a lien on the property because they will classify it as erroneous homestead exemption. Shall constitute a lien in the name of the people of Cook County. So now they will bring the power of the county, the people of the Cook County, or whatever county, on the property receiving an erroneous homestead exemption. Upon becoming aware of the existence of one or more erroneous exemptions, the chief county assessment officer shall cause to be served by both regular mail and certified mail, a notice of discovery is set forth in subsection C5, meaning now they're effectively suing you privately. And then they go into the debt collection process of retrieving it. And the maximum of collection they can do in a year, and the 6 collection in a year, blah, blah. So look, instead of us going through all this, it's just best to show how it's done right. This video wasn't even, this second part was really not even meant to exist. But I'm realizing that I'm starting to get people sending me emails, and then in consultation they're telling me about homestead exemption. I'm realizing, oh shoot, people really don't get it. People are mixing and matching. People are mixing and matching. Don't do that. Don't subrogate yourself. Don't submit yourself to them. I mean, think about it with a vehicle. Again, example of the vehicle trust. The first lien holder, if you've not watched it, I implore you to. The first lien holder is express trust, but the public face is the religious entity. This is crucial. This is how it would work even with real properties also. That's the proper structure. But at least someone is telling you. One final thing. So now the question is, since the other types of homestead exemptions outside of constitutional religious use, all those other types of homestead exemptions, since they are liberal, since they are at the discretion of the assessor, since they are discretionary, since they are privileges, how then are they calculated? Because they do not take you off the tax roll. To be taken off the tax roll means you're not even, the property is not even assessed at all. Meaning they don't take what it's worth and then take a percentage of it based on the population and the amount of use and all the stuff, and then say, hey, this is the amount that we're going to tax. They don't even do that because it's completely off the tax roll. They're not even touching it. But what if it's not on the tax roll, which is the other types of homestead exemption, which most people claim general homestead exemption. Even if they say they're doing it with express trust, it is still under general homestead exemption. Since that's a privilege, how is it then calculated? It's still in the tax roll. Well, it's calculated based on finance, meaning based on any fixed number of years, there's a fixed amount that can be deducted. So it's basically a form of property tax deduction. Whereby in 2001, if you claim general homestead, the county has determined based on their own bookkeeping that they deduct $3,000 from the taxable amount from the property tax during a certain year. And then the next year, because of inflation, they will deduct $4,000. So the amounts are fixed that can be deducted from the property tax. So say you have a mini mansion and your property tax is a little bit high. Regardless of that, if you claim general homestead exemption, the maximum that can be removed from the property tax would be a fixed amount. Now, if you own a smaller home, like a 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, cool. You know, the property tax that's fixed might cover it. So effectively, you don't pay anything. But nonetheless, that fixed amount is still on the property tax roll. And this is how it's calculated. It exists in all states. This is just one example. General homestead exemption. Except as provided in section 15-176, which is for the other types of exemptions. The maximum reduction before taxable year 2004 shall be $4,500 in counties with 3 million or more inhabitants, and 3,500 in all other counties. Meaning based on the population for the year 2004, the maximum that could be qualified under general homestead exemption is $4,500. For counties with less, it's maximum of 3,500. And then for the year 2007, it's 5K. For the year 2008, it's 5.5K. 2009 through 2011, the maximum that they can reduce, maximum, meaning up to this amount, is 6K. So you can, depending on how they exercise their discretion, they can say, hey, you qualify to be exempt for $200 this year, because, well, it's at our discretion. But in some cases, they can say, you know what, the maximum amount is 6K to be reduced from your property tax bill, so we'll give you that amount. So it's a fixed amount based on their discretion. The maximum is 6K for a certain amount a year. So for instance, year 2023, right? So say you claim general homestead exemption, regardless of whether you say you're doing it through express trust or not. For taxable years 2023 and thereafter, the maximum reduction is $10,000 in counties with 3 million or more inhabitants. So if you're in a county with 3 million or more inhabitants, the maximum reduction, meaning it can be lower, but the maximum is 10K. So they can look at your property tax bill. If your property tax bill says the property tax you owe this year is $3,000, they might say, okay, cool. Well, $3,000 we can take off. The maximum is 10K anyway. So yeah, we'll take up all the 3K. You're still in tax roll though, but we'll take up the 3K. Or they can say, well, the maximum is 10K. You owe 3K, but there's no law saying that we have to give you the exact amount or up to that amount. So we'll just give you 2K. Pay the 1K that's left because we need the money. That's how they calculate general homestead exemption. Again, if anyone is telling you these things about using an express trust for homestead exemption, be very prudent. Just know all the intricate details, the ins and outs, and how you should be organizing your affairs. Don't expose your express trust to public scrutiny. Don't expose your express trust to public scrutiny. Do not expose your express trust to public scrutiny. Homestead exemptions, if it is not religious, does not remove you from tax roll. If it is not religious, even though it says homestead exemption, so long as it's not religious, it is still on the tax roll. So now you're voluntarily putting the deed in the name of the express trust, and now you put in the express trust on a tax roll. Oh my goodness, come on now. Why would you do that? But then again, if you want to roll that way, hey, you go ahead and do your thing. At least you cannot say someone is not showing you all these details. And yes, again, it exists the same way in your state. Similar languages, different sections, different articles, different form names, but same concept. And in some cases, some states, the amount might even be higher or less because each counties have different populations. Till next time, take care. Best of luck.
I have a Patreon page and I'm inviting you to come join. For you interested in discharge, we show everything about how it's done and my own experience. Consistent posts are made explaining many things regarding said discharge. Many will seek and simply wouldn't find. Those dealing with mortgage issue or want to know more about it, we speak of it. For those dealing with basic stuff like traffic issues, we speak about the solution and I show it from my own experiences and how I permanently prevent any such issues. Those worrying about trust, different types of trust, we go over so many things consistently. Regarding trust, we show the IRS manuals. Those who are interested in suing and making money through debt collection or other means, we go over it, we show it. I show my own settlement checks and the things that I've done as a personal experience. Those interested in banking, we show subtle details and intricacies of the things that I have learned. For those interested in other things like the IRS forms and how to put it to use, we show it, explain the details. For those interested in court-related matters and intricacies, we always show it. For those interested in the spiritual aspect of things and how it works, we show and explain it. Those with child support matters, we explain and we show everything in detail also. Great puzzle pieces that can never be found in other social media platforms, but we explain it all as it relates to many different things. For those interested in express trusts and the issue of how not qualifying for taxation, which I call dinking, how it relates to any other type of trust or any other affairs, and how you can intertwine your affairs into the different types of discharge that exist and lack of qualification for taxation. Speak about it. The truth about really recusing attorneys and the whole foreign agent registration and attorney lawyer number, we speak about it. Speak about how to really bring about juries, and some of the comment section asks good questions and greater answers are given. Speak about how to get and use tax exemptions for vehicle use and sales. You don't have to belong to some organization. You can actually get yours according to the language of the legislature within your state. Go over the details that a lot of people mentor about regarding Article 1, Article 3. What really makes a court? It's not limited to just your paperwork. Most people don't know. We go over business matters for those with actual businesses, S Corp, C Corp, LLCs, those who are business minded and those who make monies. Go over other things that a lot of people don't know functions internationally. We speak about a lot of other spiritual related matters. Details on how to bring criminal charges, what it truly means to bring criminal charges, what a bill of particulars is, how to recuse a judge, details of the parliamentary rules in court and legislature, different things about standard of evidence and burden of proof, different things that a lot of people will speak of, discovery. But did you know there are 6 types of discoveries? You know how to intertwine your LLCs and S Corps with an express trust, how to not make them taxable. Do you know when Trinity versus Pagliaro really is involved? Do you know how to use your home as a home office? And the many details involved. Go over the injunction and how to enforce the different types of injunctions that exist. The intricacies of how data brokers exist and how they steal information. Not just the credit bureaus, but many data brokers and how you can prevent them. We go over grants, getting grants. We go over issues and solutions of CPN and how they're created. There are about 4 to 5 different parts that were created. We go over caveats where people say sue them, but they don't really know. We go over the things to do after you sue them. We go over the issues of privacy and technology. The whole thing about perfection of security interest, UCC, and how to use it and how to monetize the birth certificate, all that. We go over the details. There are a lot of principles and doctrines people don't know about that we go over. Go over how to really do the copyright and the details involved in it. Go over how to simply do a trademark. It's far more easier than you think. All these people telling you go to a trademark office, do this, write this letter. It's not that difficult. Go over how to fill out the GSA bond box at a time, and so many more. How to get settlement checks, how to put your vehicle in a trust. I show you from my own experiences, form for form, step by step. Go over the different types of relief to be granted. The type of relief you seek invokes the type of jurisdiction that you fall under. All these people speaking about chancery, equity, at law, common law. The relief that you seek is directly tied to the type of jurisdiction. Go over the CPN, how it's created. Go over how to obtain bonds, where to do it. Go over the different types of discharge and some more. We explain each of those types of discharge. We explain how trademark and copyright is affiliated with asset protection. We go over how to prove trust. We go over the different types of fraud. We go over the importance that many people will never know. So many more. I show my own experiences in the audio calls from court cases of how I get different types of settlement checks. Go over the different types of discharge. There's so much more that it can't even completely be spoken of here regarding trust. We go over how to create it step by step, and many more things that will never be shown on YouTube or any other platforms. Go over all the principles that people don't know about. And they speak about statute of limitation. Well, fraud does have a statute of limitation, but do you know how to subvert it? As to why that phrase fraud has no statute of limitation to bring it to life, most people don't know. There's so many things that we speak about. We speak about how to garnish people's checks and people's property. There's a form that you use for that. People don't know about it. Speak about details regarding foreign trustees. Speak about spiritual related matters. And on the Instagram page, if you get to join, come on over. There's also a Facebook page where questions and answers are posted and other reminder links to certain videos are shown. Until next time, take care. Best of luck.